The following true story I would like to share with you is about a boy named Philip. Philip was 9 in a Sunday school class of 8-year-olds. The third graders did not welcome Philip to their group, not just because he was older, but because he was, quote unquote, different. He suffered from Down syndrome and its obvious manifestations. One Sunday after Easter, the Sunday school teacher gathered some of those plastic eggs, the kind which pull apart in the middle. The Sunday school teacher gave one of these plastic eggs to each child. On that beautiful spring day, each child was to go outdoors and discover for himself some symbol of new life and place that symbolic seed or leaf or whatever inside this egg. They would then open their eggs one by one, and each youngster would explain how his find was a symbol of new life. So, the youngsters gathered around on the appointed day and put their eggs on a table, and the teacher began to open them. One child found a flower. All the little children oohed and ahed at the lovely symbol of new life. Another was a butterfly. Beautiful, the girls said. And it's not easy for an 8-year-old to say beautiful. Another egg was opened to reveal a rock. Some of the children laughed. That's crazy, one said. How is a rock supposed to be like new life? Immediately the boy spoke up and said, "That's mine. I knew everybody would get flowers and leaves and butterflies and all that stuff, so I got a rock to be different." Everyone laughed. The teacher opened the last one, and there was nothing inside. "That's not fair," someone said. "That's stupid," said another. The teacher felt a tug on his shirt. It was Philip. Looking up, he said, "It's mine. I did do it. It's empty. I have new life because the tomb is empty." The class fell silent. From that day on, Philip became part of the group. They welcomed him. Whatever had made him different was never mentioned again. And although it's not a happy ending, there's a final twist to the story which is worth sharing, especially on the feast of the resurrection. Philip's family had known he would not have a long life. Just too many things wrong with the tiny body. That summer, overcome with infection, Philip passed away. On the day of his funeral, 9-year-old boys and girls confronted the reality of death and marched up to the altar, not with flowers. 9 children with their Sunday school teacher placed on the casket of their friend their gift of love, an empty egg. It's amazing how these children have understood the symbol of an empty egg that could represent the empty tomb, the symbol of the resurrection. While the empty tomb is a historical place, it is also a deep symbol for a reality that is beyond the dimensions of our human experience and human mind. What would you choose to be an adequate symbol for a new life, a life that is stronger than death, a joy that is deeper than sorrow, and a hope that is more powerful than even fear of death. After all, I'm convinced that one of the central meanings of the resurrection of the crucified Jesus, who is risen, is that life given by the giver of life is stronger than death. Joy originating with the ultimate reality is deeper than any sorrow we might experience, and the hope that is given by the Spirit of God is able to conquer all of our fears and sufferings, including our fear of death. Now, this new way of looking at life without its finite boundaries, or experiencing deep joy even in the midst of sadness and grief, and having a firm sense of hope that is beyond hope, of course, could take a very long time to be realized. It might take even more time to transform our day-to-day lives. Our first and very natural reaction to the mystery of resurrection might well be a sense of emptiness, being alarmed by what we do not expect to happen, being amazed by the surprise, and even being paralyzed by fear or doubt, just as we heard it in the Gospel. In the Gospel passage we heard, nobody has seen the crucified and risen one yet. And Mark, the evangelist, seems to highlight the fact that the very first reaction of the faithful women who went to the tomb was manifested in surprise, sense of alarm, feelings of terror and fear. These faithful disciples of Jesus were first surprised because the heavy stone in front of the tomb had already been rolled back. Then they were alarmed by the angelic figure who tried to calm them down, entrusting them with a message to Peter and the rest of the apostles. And finally, they were so afraid and terrified, so out of themselves. Ecstasis is the word that is used here in the original, and that means being out of oneself. So it is so out of themselves that all they could do in that very moment was to run away and tell no one anything about what happened. That's how the story of Easter starts. All of these different feelings of surprise, fear, and amazement at once turned into a paralyzing trauma. Eventually, they all will have gotten over their initial shock and would have delivered the good news to the apostles, but not instantly, and not without having doubts, as we know this from other accounts of the encounter with the risen Christ. So here, let's just stop and try to reflect on our own reaction to the news of the resurrection. Are we amazed, excited, full of joy and hope? Or are we rather shocked, still fearful, doubtful, maybe even paralyzed, not really sure what to think or what to do? Of course, in our case, this is not the first time we hear about the news of the resurrection. And this makes all the difference. However, we could still ask ourselves, what is our basic or usual attitude toward this mystery of our faith, according to which Jesus of Nazareth truly has died, but he has been raised from the dead? Thus now we have an empty tomb and a promise that he will show himself to be alive at another place, another time. What is our response to this whole gospel story of the risen Christ? The clear message that has been given to Peter and the other disciples by the angelic figure was to return to Galilee. Go tell Peter to return to Galilee, Peter and the others, so they can see and encounter the experience the risen one. This specific instruction to go to Galilee can be very useful for us too, the followers and disciples of Jesus who are living in the 21st century, providing that we know the symbolic meaning behind these words. Returning to Galilee for the first disciples of Jesus meant, of course, that they will return to the place where they have first encountered Jesus, where they have become his followers and disciples, where they have experienced all those wonderful things that Jesus did, like witnessing him heal the sick, drive out demons, raising people from the dead, teaching them that God's kingdom has come near, that God's kingdom is already among them and even within them. For us, 21st century followers, going back to Galilee could be a symbol for all those places or events in our lives where and when we have experienced the unconditional and loving presence of God, when we have felt close to God, when we knew from experience that we belong to God and God belongs to us, or whenever we have learned that human life is more meaningful with God, that we could be more joyful and hopeful if we surrender to the love of God who is reaching out to us through Jesus the Christ. Therefore, I am convinced that the message for us could be very similar to that which was given to the first disciples. That is, we are all invited to return to our own Galilees, where we are promised to see, that is, to experience the presence of the risen Christ, who now carries the signs of the crucified Christ. So with the help of our imagination and memory, I would like to invite you right now to try to remember a time when you have experienced God's consoling presence and closeness. When was the first time, or maybe the last time, that you have experienced God's unconditional love for you? Try to recall an event or a place where you have experienced an intense spiritual joy of being alive, a sense of peace, peace that is beyond peace, a sense of hope, a hope that is beyond hope. You can also remember whether this joyful, peaceful, hopeful, and being fully alive experience of yours has happened to you in the midst of your family and friends, in the midst of a faith community, out there in the wild nature, or in the solitude of your private prayers. Where is your Galilee? Once you are able to remember and maybe relive the experience in your memory, then you may want to ask the crucified and risen Christ to come and meet you there, in this inner sanctuary and sacred space of your joyful memory. The Easter story tells us that we cannot find and meet the risen one in looking for him in the empty tomb, because he's not there. According to our faith and with the help of God, we can encounter the risen Christ in the joyful mysteries of our lives, in the Galilees of our experiences, whether they have happened in the moments of solitude or being with others. In all those times and places, whenever and wherever we have experienced that the life coming from God is stronger than death, the joy granted by God is stronger than any sorrow, and the hope offered through Christ is stronger than any fear, even the fear of death. Alleluia! Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia.